Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Box Office Talk. This is the show where I break down what happened at the box office, see if my predictions for the top 5 are correct, then make predictions for next week's top 5. So let's get right on into it. Last week I predicted that number 1 would be The Boy and the Heron, number 2 would be Renaissance, number 3 would be The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, number 4 would be Godzilla -1, and number 5 would be Trolls Band Together. And, you know, I only got 1 out of 5 of my predictions right for this weekend, which is a big bummer, and there are no winners for their predictions this weekend, but I am happy to say that what I thought was a pretty bold prediction actually turned out to be true. So that's really exciting that number 1 was in fact The Boy and the Heron, and I was actually kind of shocked to kind of discover that this is apparently not just the highest opening weekend that Miyazaki has had in the States for any of his films, but it's also the first time a Miyazaki or Studio Ghibli film has been number 1 at the box office. And of course, when I say the number, it's not going to sound too high right now. Obviously, the worldwide numbers are going to carry it when we break down that number. But that is still pretty exciting, though. Like exactly what I was saying last weekend. There's just enough people out there. The name Hayao Miyazaki has, grown more famous over the years, and the fact that he's coming back after 10 years ago was The Wind Rises, and now he's back with a new film, and people are fans of not just this animation style, but also just his form of storytelling, his films, and they want to see more of that. So I think even though the opening weekend will not sound too high for the States, it's still a really great sign for what could potentially be in the future if I know he said he's working on his next one, but just for anime films in general, So that's pretty exciting. So let's just go over what happened. Like I said, pretty low numbers this weekend, which I think I even talked about last weekend was a high possibility, but The Boy and the Heron opened to $12 million this weekend, and even though we don't have a confirmed budget for how much this film costs to make, worldwide it is already sitting at $86 million, which is already, I think, a pretty solid sign. As far as Hayao Miyazaki's other films and how this one compares to the other runs so far, as far as I know, there is some incomplete data from the numbers.com or just no data for some of his other films. So from what we had available, it has already outgrossed the domestic runs for The Wind Rises by 7 million, Howl's Moving Castle by 8 million, Spirited Away by 2 million, and Princess Mononoke by 10 million. It sits behind Ponyo by 3 million. And then as far as we're concerned, as far as the data that has been given, it will be the highest grossing Hayao Miyazaki film in the States. Worldwide, like I said, sitting at 86 million, so it's outgrossed Nausicaa by 80 million, Kiki's Delivery Service by 85 million, My Neighbor Totoro by 59 million, Castle in the Sky by 67 million, and Porco Rosso by 83 million. It sits behind The Wind Rises by 31 million. So domestically, I think that just speaks to where Americans' heads were at the time as far as seeing anime films, seeing anime in the theaters, showing now that there is a bit more of an acceptance to see it. The fact that this movie is about to be the highest grossing one for Miyazaki, that just speaks to the changing times, which is really stellar. Worldwide, though, grossing money for Hayao Miyazaki has never really been a problem. There's quite a few ahead of it that have grossed way more, have had really great worldwide runs, so we'll see how this one will continue to do in the coming weeks. That'll be exciting to see if it'll boost massively, But the fact that it's still doing well in both regard, it's just really stellar, and I'm glad a movie like this was able to, stand out from the rest of the crowd and got people talking, I think as far as I'm concerned, the reception has been a lot of people really like it, and then there's some people who are like, it's not my favorite Miyazaki, and, I think I prefer other ones, but they still have an admiration for it, and I think that's also great. Anyways, number 2 was The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, making $9 million, adding to a domestic total of $135 million, so still behind Mockingjay Part 2 by $146 million. Worldwide, it is now sitting at $262 million. It sits now behind Mockingjay Part 2 by $384 million, but it has now officially, since the first number that I had was $130 million for the budget, and I know some people were saying probably closer to $100 million, let's go with that. I still always stuck with that because in my head it's always always think of the worst case scenario, so let's go with the higher budget that we have heard. But officially, it has doubled this budget if you want to go by that. Like I said last weekend, if you're just going by it's strictly $100 million budget, it's already doubled it. But if you want to go in the safe route, 130, it has, and it's just kind of squeaked by there. It'll be interesting to see how well, because it's been holding over very well. It'll be interesting now that we have the introduction to Christmas season with Wonka next weekend, how much of an onslaught that'll be, if Wonka's going to take everything and the other films will stay in their spots, but the hold is not strong, or if they will be able to, manage a solid hold. Who frickin' knows, you know what I mean? Number 3 is Godzilla -1, sticking around. I heard that they did extend. I didn't even know that it wasn't guaranteed that it was going to stick around in theaters. They did extend the release period though, which is exciting that they're able to make some more money. Made $8 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $25 million worldwide. It is sitting at $48 million, so it has officially tripled its $15 million budget, unless the budget was less, because the director was asked about the budget at some event, some interview, and they were like, I wish it was 15 million. So potentially an even lower budget, which is crazy to think, number one, how great the movie looks with just that low a budget. And then number two, once you factor in how poorly, apparently how poorly the VFX workers are paid in Japan, you know, the labor laws there, it, you know, makes you feel for them, you know what I mean? Anyways, let's move on to number 4, which is Trolls Band Together, making $6 million, adding to a domestic total of $83 million. So it is still $70 million off from the original film. Worldwide, it is sitting at $173 million, and it sits $170 million away from the original film. Like I said last weekend, like I was kind of starting to talk about a little bit, it's interesting how, like, the Trolls franchise kind of became a big thing for DreamWorks, like, gearing up for World Tour, but, you know, even when that was impacted by the COVID release, it was still kind of a big thing for kids. They do these TV specials, TV shows, blah, blah, blah. And then you have the third movie coming out, and maybe it is just a thing of, like, all animated films were treated like garbage during COVID mostly, so people are conditioned to just wait for it to appear somewhere, you know, and people are realizing taking the whole family to see a movie in the theaters is way more expensive when we could just wait. You know, Obviously, I understand that, but still, it's just very interesting, you know, because it has a pretty modest budget for an animated film. Like, you know, we're going to talk about Wish in a second, but even there have been other Disney or Disney Pixar films that have had higher budgets than even Wish, and it's just interesting how, like, Trolls Band Together, I was kind of using that as the example. Like, see, it doesn't have to be like uber expensive, but, you know, it's looking like it's gonna maybe just barely break even at the 190 doubling point. So it's interesting. It's interesting. Number 5 is Wish, though. If we can jump right into that, it made $5.3 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $49 million. For its entire domestic run, it is still $5 million off from outgrossing Raya and the Last Dragon, but worldwide, now that it's sitting at $105 million, congrats, you crossed over 100 mil. It has outgrossed Treasure Planet by $14 million, and it sits behind Raya here by $11 million. So I think we'll be seeing it outgross Raya in at least the next couple days. It's pity accomplishments, you know, outgrossing not just the lower grossing Disney films earlier on, but also the most recent COVID ones. So Strange World and Riot, it's like, these aren't achievements. What the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, especially when you take into the context of this is the 100-year anniversary film. How the fuck is this not a box office smash hit? How the fuck did they not market this appropriate? How the fuck did they not make a film that touched people the same way none of their other anniversary films have? You know what I mean? I think that's like my big, not to like delve into like review territory for a box office show. I mean, I feel like I do that all the time anyways, but it's like, man, watching that movie, other than the references they throw in, there's nothing about the storytelling or even the characters to me that strikes as like, oh, this is the magic of Disney. You know what I mean? Like, they always think of story first, and that's what matters. And I know some people have really enjoyed, I know probably there's some kids out there that have enjoyed it because it's a Disney film, blah, blah, blah. But man, you don't have, you know what I mean? Like, we don't have to hand wave away, like, you know, certain films' qualities just because, like, well, it's for kids, you know what I mean? Because, like, rewatching, like, a Tangled or a Moana or even the first Frozen, or even recently Encanto, a recent Disney animated musical, man, those are really good, you know? Like, it doesn't always have to be, man, the older Disney cartoons are the best. It can be the modern CG animated stuff, too, even the ones that aren't musicals, like a Wreck-It Ralph or Zootopia. Like, these things can be great, and it's all based off of, like, the imagination and creativity of the storytellers. And I think my biggest thing about Wish, and why I think a lot of people haven't really connected with it, and why it isn't the box office smash that maybe they wanted for their anniversary film, is because it lacks so much. It feels like someone trying to ape off of that style, but they should be the style, you know what I mean? Sorry, I haven't made a review for that. I haven't made a review since fucking Secret Invasion. Maybe I should do one. Or maybe I'll slack off again. Oops. Let's move on to number 6, which is Renaissance, making $5 million, having a pretty big drop from opening number 1. Like I was saying, you know, like, I'm not trying to speak to Beyonce's relevance or anything. Obviously, people love her and she has a fan base. I think it must have been, like, the Taylor Swift concert movie. Number one, Taylor Swift is, I guess you could say, technically newer and a little bit more like, appealing towards like all kind of generations of people. And I think a lot of people really knew the concert film is coming, you know what I mean? And I feel like this Beyonce one, I feel like I knew it was coming. I'm sure there are other fans who knew it was coming, but I think there's just kind of a lack of like a big promotion like the Taylor Swift one had, if I'm being honest with you. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that. But it now adds to a domestic total of 28 million. Still don't know what the budget of this thing is, but as far as other concert films, I'm not going to compare it to the Taylor Swift run like I did the first weekend, but it did outgross Katy Perry's Part of Me by 3 million, and it's a couple 100,000 over the One Direction This Is Us concert film, and needs 4 million until it outgrosses Kevin Hart, Let Me Explain. Yes, comedy concert films count in this list. Worldwide it is only sitting at 33 million, so that's 1 million over Katy Perry's and 1 million until Richard Pryor's Live on the Sunset Strip worldwide run for that concert film. So yeah, it's compared to Taylor Swift, and obviously it doesn't look amazing in any way, shape, or form, but I don't know what the budget of this thing is, maybe as far as like putting together the documentary. So I don't know, but hopefully this is good. I'm sure the hold was not what they wanted though. And I feel like I would have been a lot surprised if you had told me around the time they initially announced this, because it seemed like it was kind of a big deal when they did announce it, but it kind of, somewhere along the way, it all kind of dropped off. Number 7 is Napoleon, making 4 million, adding to a domestic total of 53 million. So for Ridley Scott's filmography domestically, it is 6 million over Kingdom of Heaven and a couple 100,000 over his most recent film, House of Gucci. Needs 9 million until it outgrosses Alien. Worldwide, it is sitting at 170 million. That's 30 million off from crossing over the initial production budget of 200 million. And also, it has already outgrossed House of Gucci by 23 million and Black Hawk Down by 11 million, and needs 14 million until it reaches Alien. So there you go. Alien's the one to beat now domestically and worldwide. Like I've been saying and I know some people have tried to perform like gotchas for like, oh, you're complaining about box office for The Marvels, but you're not complaining about Killers of the Flower Moon or Napoleon, you know what I mean? But even after all of the all of the caveats that come from a Apple co-distributed, co-funded release, it's like, still some people like just try to get gotchas at you. How dare you try to criticize the Marvels even though the Marvels technically made more? By the way, the Marvels is gone. It kind of, I think it disappeared last week, maybe the week before, but it's been gone for, like, it dropped off. It didn't connect with anyone. So the fact that, like, oh, it technically made a little bit more. I don't even know if that, I don't even remember where the Marvels was last time I talked about, maybe over 200 million. But, like, that doesn't matter if you can't even break it. Like, and it doesn't even have a deal like these Apple films have, where it's kind of like, Paramount is distributing it. They may need a certain percentage back from box office. Sony's distributing Napoleon. They need a certain percentage back. We just want the movie for our library. I don't know why some people are so fucking dumb when it comes to like trying to do these things, trying to do these gotcha moves. And it's like you're ignoring every ounce of context. Ugh. Let's move on to number 8, which is Waitress the Musical, a Fathom event that came out. It's only in theaters for the next couple days, so don't expect it to, last too much longer. So if you want to see it, go ahead. I saw it and I loved it. I have never seen the musical of it before. I watched the original with Kerry Russell a couple days ago and I loved it, and then I watched the musical and I loved that too. It made 3 million this weekend and the budget is apparently 30 million, so I'm kind of I don't know. It's interesting how high that is, but maybe if they promoted a bit more, maybe they could have really reached out there. But I think once this hits streaming somewhere, a lot of musical theater fans, now that they have access to something like this with Sarah Bareilles, that could be really exciting for them. You know what I mean? That's the thing, got a big audience of theater nerds out there. It'd be great if you could pander to them more with like, say you're releasing a musical about Wonka or The Color Purple or Mean Girls, but instead in the trailers they very vaguely hint at musical elements, but they're not showing off any of them. Like The Color Purple and Mean Girls, I believe, are at least The Color Purple is definitely, those two are for sure Broadway originals first. Like the movies are based off the Broadway plays. Pander to the Broadway audience by really highlighting we're doing those shows. Get musical theater fans excited that you're doing a new one with Wonka, that it's not just every song you've heard already. Sorry, I don't mean to go on a tangent. Let's move on to number 9, which is Animal, holding over from last weekend, making 2.2 million, adding to a domestic total of 11 million. Worldwide, it sits at 14 million. So, like I was saying last weekend, the budget's 100 crore. Who knows how much they need to break even on that? But hey, they made a little bit more. And now closing out the video, number 10, The Shift. Man, this did not last long, making 2.1 million, adding to a domestic total of 8 million. And if you thought, well, maybe the movie's cheap enough where that's okay, nope, the budget's 6.4 million. So they still needed like about 4 or 5 million until they could break even, quote unquote. So, womp 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 womp. Sorry, Neil McDonough, I guess. Now it's time for the fun part, the predictions for next week's top 5. Number 1, I've been talking about it for a little bit. I think Wonka's really going to come in, and I think it'll do well in its opening weekend. We just heard a little bit ago that, you know, internationally it actually did a little bit better in its than its estimation. So it opened about 40 million internationally. So that's already going to be added to the worldwide total when the US numbers come out next weekend when it's released in the States. But I also think just for the holiday season, I think this will not, I don't think it'll be, I'm not going to say anything bold, like, I think this will be the Greatest Showman level of, like, holiday hit, you know what I mean? Or, like, Puss in Boots, or, like, Jumanji did the same thing. But I think it will have at least, I think because there's a solid word of mouth going around, and I think because it already outperforms some other numbers from the international audience, I think the same could potentially happen with this, and I think we could be seeing a pretty surprising hit here. Number 2, I have to go with Christmas with the Chosen, Holy Night, just because I recognize it's coming out at both of the theaters that I mostly frequent. I saw it's playing there. I was like, well, it's probably got a wide release, and the last time I bet against The Chosen, I lost. So I guess I gotta go with that, you know? Then I think number 3 will be The Boy and the Heron. Number 4, The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And then number 5, Godzilla -1. But what are your predictions for next week's top 5? Leave them in the comments below. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.